I'm very lucky to be here tonight. I feel very privileged because normally on budget day I'd be stuck in a budget lockup where we all go into this sealed off area for hours on end to read up on the budget, talk to the politicians, and we can't come out of it until after the speech is delivered so we can share our analysis with you. I ducked out of it this year. I'm just hosting the show as per normal, and I'll catch up with everything later on. But Judith Sloan, our great economics commentator and writer with the Australian newspaper and elsewhere, is in the lockup in Brisbane. I caught up with her, though, earlier in the day before she disappeared. Judith Sloan, thanks for joining us. First up, you've written in The Australian today about coal being the new gas, or gas being the new coal. The Greenies have sort of demonised coal. You reckon they're onto gas now?
Absolutely. You know, in fact, there's a group, a particular group, that wants to ban gas stoves and gas hot water services in households, and that's definitely for new houses. But some of them think we should also be ripping out our gas stoves and our gas hot water services, which it's a very, very big thing in Victoria in particular. A very high proportion of people have gas stoves and gas hot water.
Well, it's nuts. It's all driven by this climate stuff. We're one of the largest exporters, if not the largest exporter of gas to the world. It's a cleaner fuel than coal. The idea initially was let's get rid of coal and burn more gas because that's better for our emissions profile. Yet now they want to prevent even the use of gas, let alone the exploration and exploitation of it.
Well, isn't that the point? That, you know, they went on one thing and then they move on to the next. So really, it's I think, and one of the comments in my column today I thought made the interesting point, which is that in fact it's not really about coal. It's not really about gas. It's about the kind of society they want to impose on us, including, I think, turning their back on, you know, a liberal democracy and telling people how to live their lives.
Yeah, they want a poor society by the sounds of it. Speaking of that, the budget today, you're off to a lockup in Brisbane. When this goes to air, you'll be in there going over the numbers. These are numbers that we wouldn't have had nightmares about 5 years ago, 2 years ago, a year ago. The level of debt here and the level of government deficit going to record levels. Should we be concerned?
Well, of course we should be concerned. I mean, I think it's extraordinary that if someone had told me 12 months ago that, you know, there'd be a $60 billion, $80 billion wage subsidy in the form of JobKeeper, I would have told them they were nuts. But it is different times. But I have a slightly different take on this. You know, people are saying this is the most important budget since the Second World War and the like. I think, you know, it's still too early to say whether or not we will, to a degree, bounce back. Now, I know there are sectors that will continue to be adversely affected, pretty much anything connected with international tourism and international education. But you do see a lot of snapback, including in particular in Queensland. And so I think Morrison's quite clever in the sense that he's saying, you know, this is our response now, and it's possibly more than measured. It's really, I think, you know, going big. But at the same time, he's prepared to adjust it in terms of what happens down the track. So I think that's a very good idea. I mean, one of the really big challenges is the uneven pace of the recovery, really. So, you know, the Victorian situation has really created a tremendous problem in terms of policy making, because you have to set policy on a national basis, and yet really most of the problems now are in the Victorian economy.
Now, if we can put the pandemic to one side, which is a big ask, I know, but let's presume that we get through it sooner or later, the individual tax cuts will stand us in good stead. To the extent there's any company tax cuts, they will also stand us in good stead. Sensible, efficient infrastructure, if it's invested in by the government, will stand us in good stead too into the future. What are the key areas where you're worried the government might be spending wastefully?
Well, I mean, I guess the fear is that what you'd call the average quality of the spend will decline in the context of such dramatic increases in expenditure. And I mean, there already, I think, have been some serious question marks over JobKeeper, for example, where it was possible to manipulate the affairs of a business, so individuals were receiving that who shouldn't have, you know. So, you know, I agree there are some things that one won't object to. I think, I mean, actually, I think that the changes to the income tax schedule are actually still relatively modest, but they're a step in the right direction. There won't be a company tax cut, but there will be, I think, a continuation of a capital allowance or accelerated depreciation. And so that's a sort of quasi company tax cut. And I hope that there'll be an emphasis a bit on the smaller infrastructure projects that can actually have quite a big impact locally. And they will tend to be more efficiently priced and be able to be conducted relatively quickly. I mean, I think the trouble with some of the big infrastructure projects, and we've seen this in Victoria, but also in New South Wales and actually up in Queensland, that they're undertaken by big multinational firms. The cost overruns are substantial and there are huge delays. So if we can focus the infrastructure more at the achievable end, I think that will be a good thing.
Now, this is the most decentralised budget in terms of media coverage we've seen for many years. Because of the pandemic, there's lockups all around the country. You'll be in a lockup in Brisbane as this interview goes to air. We won't all be locked in this budget lockup in Canberra as per normal. I'm lucky I'm escaping this year to do this show. But tell us about the budget lockup. You're an unashamed budget lockup sceptic. Should it be dispensed with altogether?
Well, plenty of countries around the world don't have it. So when the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK delivers the annual budget, he simply stands up, he or she, it's always been he thus far, stands up and delivers the budget speech in Parliament. I mean, I think in days gone by there were some sort of problems about, you know, cigs up, beer up with the excise changes. By and large, those are now all locked in, so we've lost that commercial sensitivity. But I mean, my argument about the lockups, really, and I mean, just remember, Chris, how extraordinarily unpleasant it was eating that bacteria-laden shushies in the tiny little corridors.
Yeah, I like the lollies, though. I always enjoyed the tubes and lollies.
The lollies weren't bad. I agree with the lollies. Although I wondered whether the dentists had kind of put them in there free of charge. Was that it was sort of basically a marketing opportunity for the government, and you know, the Treasurer and his staff strut through and the Finance Minister struts through, and it's all really, you're sort of there imprisoned, and in the end you kind of think, look, I'll write whatever you say as long as you get me out of here, you know. So it was a very inefficient thing to do. It's very expensive for me. It was very expensive for media to send all those people to Canberra, as you know. So hopefully there's a bit of dollar savings for the media companies this way, because people can just go to their local offices and have and indeed it's a shorter lockup this time, only like 3 hours, 3-4 hours. So I think that's a good thing too.
Great stuff. Well, you look forward to reading your analysis in The Australian tomorrow, Judith.
It's a pleasure, Chris.